Well, let's now unpack all of these issues around the ICJ with SABC International News Editor Sophie Mokoena. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'd like us to start off here. What happens tomorrow, and also the clarity that is required, that the judgment tomorrow is not necessarily on the test of genocide itself?
Well, we expect the President of the International Court of Justice, I'm now thinking of the ICC, yes, the President of the International Court of Justice to deliver the ruling. The ruling will look at what South Africa requested. We know that South Africa has requested that the court must send a strong message and a ruling that revolves around ensuring that Israel doesn't continue with its military operations in Gaza, so that you avoid loss of lives. In other words, you stop the bombardment of Gaza, because at the moment, when you look at the numbers, you find that it's women and children and civilians who have died, and therefore you can't continue with this situation. The second important issue, South Africa wants the very same Israel that is a signatory to the Genocide Convention of 1945 to ensure that there is no genocide committed in Gaza. Another third important issue, the decision by Israel to request Palestinians to move either to north, to south, where many of them are currently displaced, must cease, and they must be allowed to return to their homes, and therefore stop this movement and almost eviction and forced removal, similar to what apartheid did to black South African majority in this country. Don't displace people, because when they are displaced, they don't have shelter, they don't have food. It is another form of a genocide. The other important one, the very, very important one for me, the issue of aid and delivery of aid. Israel must ensure that people have food, have shelter, have clothes. You can only do that when you allow the humanitarian aid to be delivered to Gaza. But what we saw yesterday, we saw Israelis blocking the trucks that were supposed to deliver aid to Gaza at the border, Kerem Shalom. And that attracted international condemnation, because we saw the flags of Israel hoisted on air and then blocking these trucks that are supposed to deliver food, aid, medical supply to ordinary people in Gaza. That's another form of genocide. I mean, that kind of a thing, because people will die of hunger, diseases, and other related issues. So these are the main requests from South Africa, and this is the court that is supposed to say, you stop the halt or put provisions in terms of how they can avoid loss of life. They must also rule in terms of what Israel must do to stop the genocide. And then the last thing, they must also rule in terms of ensuring that Israel does agree and assist the United Nations in terms of delivering of aid in Gaza.
I wonder then, considering what is played out now and the issue that you mentioned now of the aid being blocked, because during the application that was brought by South Africa, Israel argued before the court that actually what has happened is that we've increased aid, we've allowed more trucks to go through the borders, we've also allowed water as well as fuel to go through the borders, almost trying to create a situation that there is no emergency, as South Africa has argued. But now we are seeing this playing out. Does the court at all even look at issues that are playing out outside of what has been presented before it?
Lies cannot be sustained. That's what they said. But look today, yesterday, the visuals are there, glaring evidence of them blocking the delivery of aid. It's a big story internationally. And that's why people are saying it is important for the court to be clear in terms of what needs to happen, because you can't rely on Israel. They spoke about, you recall they said they didn't bombard any hospitals. The World Health Organization Director General, Dr. Ghebreyesus, has given the stats and information in terms of the destruction in relation to health infrastructure, a number of UN staff that have died, including those in those facilities that are assisting with health matters. And therefore, there's a huge contradiction in terms of their presentation in response to South Africa and what is happening on the ground. The other important issue during the deliberation, remember how firm they were to say that they've de-escalated. It's not true. People are still dying in Gaza. Bombardment is continuing. And therefore, what they say and what's happening on the ground, it's a contradiction, a huge contradiction. And that is why this example now of Israel flags, people stopping delivery of aid, it's there, it's trending worldwide.
Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, a couple of days, or just a couple of moments actually after that court hearing, the 2-day court hearing, said that no one will stop us, not The Hague, not the axis of evil, and not anyone else. So if this order then gets handed down, and if the order is in favor of what South Africa has asked for, what happens next? Considering again what Sharon Bryce-Peace was reporting on that bipartisan letter that has come from US lawmakers.
Exactly what we are talking about, inconsistency and lies. Clearly, they are going to answer, because when you look at what Dr. Nevi Pillay said, who is familiar with processes of the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice, and having served in the Human Rights Commission of the UN, if they don't comply, there will be huge pressure, and they are going to lose the international support from many countries. You may still have few who will stand with them, but countries such as the United States of America and their allies in Europe, when the judgment has been delivered, they will have to find a way to respect the judgment. Because remember, when those lawmakers in America are saying it's disgusting, what disgusting when a country is using proper legal means that are available at multilateral fora to address the challenges the globe is facing? Because when the United Nations was formed after the Second World War, their intention was to ensure that there's peace in the world. And they went further to have these organs of the United Nations to ensure that you are really able to manage another Third World War, what happened then. And therefore, that's why you have the Security Council. But because the Security Council, the important organ of the UN, failed to agree to stop what was happening and people dying in Gaza, South Africa, as a member of the UN and also a signatory to the Genocide Convention, used another organ of the UN, that is the World Court, the ICJ, to say, okay, we can't agree, we can't stop this, let's move to another important organ to see whether they can't help us. They went there. And therefore, it speaks to these double standards around the world.
So the US is already clear that they are arguing that the South Africa's case is meritless. It's the US, again, that is part of the permanent members on the Security Council. What are the chances of them vetoing, again, the implementation of an order that says that it finds in favor of South Africa, if indeed it does find favor of South Africa? They
will, but I think Dr. Nevi Pillay summed it well, that let's start with Israel. If Israel doesn't want to comply or apply the provisions that have been requested, if they are granted, it means it will be seen as a rogue state. Now, for America, I wonder how America will handle this, because America was vocal in the war on Ukraine around these issues. And that will portray the US as being a country that is supporting a rogue state that is defying international law. And therefore, the image of this so-called shopkeeper of the world, the United States of America, will be dented, particularly in the eyes of the international community. So because the court doesn't have law enforcement, doesn't have infrastructure to go and get into Gaza and stop Israel with military and all of that. The reality is, if the court rule in favor of South Africa, the image of Israel and those who are supporting Israel, if they don't comply or enforce what the court is saying, will be damaged and it will be irreparable.
What about South Africa? If the court rules actually in favor of Israel, what happens to our international status and our brand, the reputation of South Africa? And what's Clayson Mokoena saying?
Well, South Africa has nothing to lose if you really interpret this issue, because South Africa is just using processes that are available. If you get fired, you will go to the union. If the union can't help you, you will go to the labor court. If the labor court can't help you, if that matter is linked to human rights or to constitutional obligations, you will go to the highest court in the land, that is the Constitutional Court. But if you lose in all these different stages, it doesn't mean that you are a bad person. We have lost, but you were trying to get your job back. The same with South Africa. South Africa is just using the available processes and means globally to address what they think might lead to a serious crisis. They don't resort to supplying arms to Hamas or supplying arms to Palestine so that you can continue with the bloodshed from both sides. But the other issue is, remember, this is a provisional measure. We still have to go to a real case. And I think during the real case, more evidence, more countries will join. As I pointed out when I came back, that I attended one session, countries in the region, in the Middle East, have agreed now to come up with practical support for South Africa, and I think that will include finances, evidence, and all of that. But let's take a listen at what Clayson Mokoena had to say in terms of, you know that the Minister of International Relations, Dr. Naledi Pandor, left South Africa yesterday. In an hour, he will be landing in the Netherlands and then drive to The Hague, where he's going to join the team. And tomorrow, she is the one who will be there, because this is actually international relations matter and story. Let's take a listen.
The International Court of Justice has announced that it will deliver its order on Friday, 26 January 2024, on the request for the indication of provisional measures submitted by South Africa in a genocide case against Israel. The Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Dr. Naledi Pandor, will be in attendance representing South Africa. On December 29, 2023, South Africa filed a lawsuit with the ICJ requesting an injunction against Israel on the grounds that Israel's attacks on Gaza violate the Genocide Convention. South Africa is requesting that the ICJ grant interim injunctions, including that Israel immediately cease its military operations in Gaza, take reasonable measures to prevent the genocide of Palestinians, ensure that the displaced return to their homes and have access to humanitarian assistance, including adequate food, water, fuel, medical, and hygiene supplies, including shelter and clothing. It should also take necessary steps to punish those involved in the genocide and preserve the evidence of genocide.
Well, that's Clayson Mokoena there, the head of public diplomacy. But in conclusion, also, as the Minister of International Relations go to the Netherlands, and all eyes will, of course, be on this judgment, there's also the accusation that from a political level, the ANC could be in bed with Iran, and this is an accusation that has been coming up over and over again. How do you think the minister will be able to handle that situation?
Well, I
that
think
accusation?
I think we know that South Africa has a strong relationship with Iran. They invited the president of Iran during BRICS summit. He was here. He spoke. And we know that in terms of the South-South cooperation, this is part of the grouping. Well, of course, countries will agree on some issues and they will disagree on some issues. For example, the execution of an activist in Iran yesterday, South Africa, I don't think will support that. I will tell you why. You would recall when there was an execution of a high-profile politician in Nigeria during the former President Nelson Mandela's tenure. He spoke out against Nigeria. And remember, it is the very same Nigeria during the struggle that had a special tax collecting money that was called Mandela tax to support the ANC struggle. But South Africa was able to speak out. So I think, yes, they will agree on certain things, but South Africa will take a different position on certain things. And I think people have a right to critique South Africa's foreign policy so that as a country, we are not a rogue state. And therefore, that criticism, I think DERCO will have to respond to it.
Yep. Just quickly in conclusion, our broadcasting plan for tomorrow's announcement and the order that will be handed down?
Well, tomorrow we'll have a build-up from Morning Live, speaking to different people because of the time difference. And of course, just before lunchtime, On Point and Agenda and others will do the same. And we will definitely take live the delivery of that ruling by the president of the International Court of Justice. And thereafter, we will try to get hold of Minister Naledi Pandor. But secondly, we will have Alex Ketia outside the court to give us what's happening outside court. This was a short notice.
Okay, so for comprehensive cover of the ICJ judgment that will be handed down tomorrow, do follow the SABC News channel and also our various social media platforms to get the latest updates around what is expected to happen at the ICJ and also when that matter is handed down.